I want to show you a character design I did recently, and this is for an animated puppet. I am, just for fun, doing a bunch of the X-Men characters, heroes and villains. This is one of the goofiest villains from the X-Men franchise. It is Fred J. Dukes, aka the Blob. And the Blob is a severely obese man who has the power to stand in one spot and not move him, which means if you want to totally ignore the Blob, you could. Commonly in comics, he's punched and someone's fist gets stuck in his blubber. It's very hard to believe that a character like this would be made today. This is not a particularly PC character whose sole power is being fat, essentially. But he is really fun to draw, and he's fun to think about, especially if you're wondering, like, what could be a possible threat to the X-Men? Somebody like Apocalypse, or somebody like Magneto, who thinks it's kill or be killed. No, the Blob is just a fat guy who's often portrayed as really rude. So I'm drawing him in Illustrator first, and my drawing style in Illustrator is a combination of using basic shapes and using more freehand pencil work. I'll do a little bit of reference for his costume, but it isn't that big a deal to me if he's 100% accurate. Of course, these characters have had many costumes over the years, so there's no real need to pick the exact details of anything. I'm going to give him some eyelids, and these eyelids are going to end up matted to the eyeball shape. My own eyeball shape tends to be a circle with a sort of a specular highlight. I'm going to give him some little off-color teeth. I think of a rude character like the Blob. He's going to have some yellow teeth, probably smokes a lot of cigars. The mouth shapes are created because Character Animator registers the different mouth shapes for when you want a character to speak. So you have to draw these visemes. The viseme list goes neutral, smile, surprised, D, E, F, L, M, O, R, S, and woo. And some of that animation can be improved if you have multiple visemes. Many of these visemes are actually improved if you do variations on them. For example, most of the vowel shapes, I'll draw two sets of mouths, a smaller mouth for the beginning of woo and a larger mouth for the end of woo, and apply a technique called cycle layers in Character Animator, where when the character makes the sound, it'll go all those frames, however many frames you have. So if you had a mouth shape for woo that incorporated 5 layers, 5 different variations of woo, it would cycle through all 5 of those. I don't find that necessary. I basically make 2. And for a lot of my Character Animator designs, I'll essentially make one arm, one leg, clone it, place it on the other side of the body, and then decide what sort of variation I need on that other arm or leg to make it distinct. And usually it's making that further arm a little bit darker and also putting in the details for the hand. So I've gone to Photoshop, I've positioned all the parts where they belong in the Character Animator hierarchy, and now I'm in the rigging process, where I essentially put where all the joints are, the bones are, and give him the behaviors and attributes I want him to have, like having a gut that dangles, so when he moves, he'll bounce and his gut will move up and down. I'll do the same to his behind, maybe his bottom chin. Make sure all the mouth shapes are rigged properly. When I do my rigging in Character Animator, I have to have Photoshop open at the same time, and that's essentially to fix position of attributes or make sure things are labeled properly so they can be considered independent. Lastly, I'll apply a bunch of behaviors to Blob. Auto blink, the walk behavior, breathe. These are things that I commonly apply to all of my characters because it helps make them very lifelike. So now that we can see our blob walking, we see a lot of deformity going on. We see a lot of areas where his arm isn't particularly swinging on a hinge the way it's supposed to. This is normal that I have to take an extended period of time to re-rig a character after I rig them the first time. Every character is a little bit different. The position of Blob's belt, for example, and the size of his arms and the size of his legs mean that the way that I rig him is going to be a little bit different than the way that I rig, say, Wolverine or Jean Grey. When I give a walk cycle to a character, I like to have them all have their own unique walk cycles and attributes. I feel like the Blob is pretty funny if he's actually running all of the time. And if you can think of a very massive character like the Blob, to have somebody who's throwing their weight forward and sort of stumbling forward, that'd actually be more terrifying than seeing this big fat guy just stumble towards you slowly. Once I get my walk cycles down, if there's any other details I feel like I've missed, I'll go back to Photoshop and add those in. For example, shading. And it's just a simple matter of doing an adjustment layer and adding an inner shadow, making sure that the inner shadow is in its right place on every area. So his ear is a little bit above his hair, which is on top of his head as far as the layer hierarchy goes. I need to make sure that inner shadow doesn't look like the ear is totally separate from his face. And that's how you rig the Blob.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more creative tutorials, gear reviews and video art. Also check out our Patreon for weekly bonus videos and model photography sets.